Outdoorsmen of Reddit. What is the most terrifying experience you've encountered in the woods? Walking in the pitch black out to a deer stand. So dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Heard some circling around me of something large. It was trotting along. No big deal, figured it was a deer. Then it stopped and let out the most bone-chilling howl I have ever heard. So loud it was like it was inside of me. A few wolves howled back in the distance, and it ran off. Needed new underwear. I got to tell you, homie, from one outdoorsy human to another, if something is circling around you, it is 100% always a predator. At that point your best bet is to hope it's only one, and not a pack of predators. Eater except in armadillo regions. Those bumbling goofballs might circle you without being predatory at all. They're just goofballs. Fucking armadillos, man. Place me and a fiend-used camp was covered by a ton of them. Nothing like going to grab some water from the river in the middle of the pitch-black night, and suddenly hearing what loud rustling coming from just a few feet away. Always terrifying for the first few seconds until you can adjust your eyes and focus on some little goofball rolling around in the leaves. I would like armadillos to be referred to exclusively as goofballs from now on, if we could arrange that. I was backwoods camping in Canada with my ex. Deep forest. We'd been out there a day or two, and hadn't seen anyone. That evening we were in the tent playing cards, and heard something in the bushes, making a giant racket. It was getting steadily closer. It got to the area we were in and stopped. We debated what to do, but finally opened the tent, both completely freaked out, and found chickens. 3 chickens, en route home to an organic farm we didn't know was nearby. I was surprised I couldn't think of a story for this thread considering how much time I've spent backcountry camping in really remote places, but your story unlocked a memory. Summer of 2020 I took my kid on a mother-daughter road trip, where we were mostly camping, for social distance reasons, and because it's kind of our thing that nobody else in the family is interested in doing with us. We'd been driving for almost 10 hours at this point, and finally managed to find a halfway decent unoccupied backcountry site about 1/4 mile off the road in a section of Sequoia National Forest way up near a mountain summit. We were probably only about 2 miles from the nearest ranger station, but a long helicopter away from any medical facility. A little before sunset I started hearing twigs snapping. Large twigs, more like medium-sized branches, were being stepped on and broken. Then I heard it again from the opposite direction about 10 minutes later. It became pretty clear that something large was circling nearby, so I calmly suggested to my daughter that we go hang out in the tent and listen to our favorite podcast on my phone, to get away from the mosquitoes, actually to try to give the impression there were more adult humans with us, and at least put one barrier between us and whatever was out there. Finally, just before dusk, I heard the movement of something heavy that was definitely located between our tent and our vehicle, so I mustered the courage to go out with a flashlight and investigate, because that's when I realized I had left our only weapon, a large hunting knife, in the trunk of the car. Fucking cows. Apparently some local rancher had permission to graze his cattle in that area. I was a bit surprised considering our proximity to a patch of critically endangered redwood forest, but that's Central California for you. Was there a full moon? An after-dark flash flood that roared through camp. 12 of us. 5 of them were sleeping in the canyon bottom. It's amazing nobody died. That was 32 years ago, and I still sleep lightly and always pack clean underpants. I grew up in the mountains of New Mexico. I will never sleep in a low spot, like a canyon or along a creek. I will always make camp on a local high. I have seen numerous flash floods and have known multiple people killed in them. I've known about flash flooding for most of my life, but a few years ago I saw a video of a guy standing in a dry creek when a flash flood occurred. He was a normal adult dude, and was actively looking, and saw it coming, and he barely got out of the way in time. I knew it came fast, but I didn't know it was that fast. One of the weirdest statistics I know is that more people die in deserts every year by drowning than they do by dehydration. Flash floods will fuck you up. As a Boy Scout, we found a bunch of scorpions in our Adirondack. We ran outside screaming our heads off, and then lightning struck a tree like 20 yards away. We turned on our heels and ran straight back to the scorpions. This is absolute chaos, haha. Former life as a hydrogeologist studying wetlands, I had a few. 1. Staring contest with a Florida panther. I'm pretty sure I pissed myself. Came around a palm bunch and ran into it. We were maybe 15 feet apart. Not sure how long we stood, then he bolted. 2. Tying wetland delineation flags on tree bases. Went to tie one on, and as I was doubling the knot I looked, and there was a coiled water moccasin about a foot from my hands. Eyes open, just watching. 3. Delineating another wetland. Walking around but preoccupied with looking for a survey flag. Didn't initially realize the log I stepped over was about a 12 feet gator. I tiptoed the fuck out of there. Thankfully cottonmouths are a lot more chill than people give them credit for. Big cats on the other hand are terrifying. Relaxed dinosaurs are another no-go for me. I came here to defend the cottonmouth. Thank you for getting here first! ! I've worked with panthers and they tend to be a lot more bluff than other big cats. Especially our inbred Florida ones. They're happy to not be seen and attack from cover or above. When I was about 15 years old, me and some of my friends decided to go camping at a nearby lake. It was a 3 to 4 hours hike, and the nearest house was maybe 3 hours away. We brought some homemade wine and drank the whole night and ate poorly grilled hot dogs. Life was good. We all shared the tent, so it was crowded as fuck in the tent, but we all fell asleep around 2 a.m. At 4 I wake up because I can feel someone running their hand down my forearm. Not that unlikely that someone brushes up against me since there wasn't any space to move around in the crowded tent. But this is the arm that is facing the tent. So someone touched me from the outside of the tent. Sit up and gets instantly horrified to see that all my friends are sound asleep in the tent with me. I put on my deepest voice and shout left double angle bracket, whoever the fuck you are, you need to leave right double angle bracket. And a manly low voice answers me left double angle bracket, you should pack up your stuff and leave right double angle bracket, not threatening or aggressive, just calmly and in a dead kinder way, right double angle bracket. By now all my friends are awake and are just looking at me. No words, just pure horror in their eyes. Say, okay, we will go, but you need to leave. Hurry up. When we get out of the tent, this man, who is fucking huge BTW, has taken the little row boat that was laying at the bank and gotten into it, and is just sitting in the middle of the lake and watching us pack up our stuff and trying to get the fuck away ASAP. We had to walk around the lake at our way back, and he was just sitting there watching us. We never went back. Edit with some context. This was 17 years ago in a rural Scandinavian country. We have a left double angle bracket free to roam or right double angle bracket, so we were not trespassing. We knew our way around the small town we grew up. Everybody knows everybody. There have been no people missing and or found dead. Never. There hasn't been a murder in generations. We told our parents, who at first tried to calm us down, and they said that we were probably overreacting. But the way he caressed my arm before he told us to go was not normal. When we told them everything and what he said to us, we were told to never go back. After COVID we all met up and the subject came up, and we tried to do some digging. There are no houses or cabins anywhere near. The lake is way too small to fish in. When he was sitting dead center in his little boat, there was maybe 60 feet to land on all sides. No one has ever seen this man before or after. Thank you for all the upvotes. This story is terrifying. Alternative perspective. I was patient while drunk teenagers trespassed on my property. Yeah, it doesn't work like that in a lot of places over here. You're chill to camp. In fact, Top Edit even confirms it isn't the US, and they weren't trespassing. A few years ago, a teenager on the next road over went missing. They said he was autistic and ran away from home on foot. We're in a very rural area. They had cops and people walking in the woods for a couple weeks looking for the kid. Never found him. The following summer, I found a jacket, some empty Pepsi cans, a knife, and a lighter at the base of a tree in the woods on our property. They came and looked again, didn't find anything else. It was confirmed to be his jacket. I have an autistic daughter who can't speak. She rarely responds when spoken to. She will occasionally run off. I'm getting old. In 5 years, I won't be able to catch her. Check with your local sheriff department/police department to see if they have Project Lifesaver or something like that. It's an bracelet, or something I don't remember exactly, that can direct emergency responders to the missing person's location. My friend of 2 autistic kids, one being non-verbal, had our local sheriff department come talk about it at a school event recently. Thank you. It's a GPS tracker on a snap bracelet. We had one for my mill with dementia who used to wander. The tough part was making sure it was on every day, but it was invaluable. They found her the one time they needed to, within a couple hours. I work in the bush and sometimes spend months out there. Most terrifying was seeing a bear start to circle me right as the helicopter pilot radioed me to say he couldn't get to my location because of the weather. Luckily I had a shotgun with me, and eventually the pilot got down to me, but yeah, sitting there in the sleet, while watching that grizzly slowly and sneakily try to cut around my position in the fading light was absolutely terrifying. The whole time I was trying to come up with possible ways to keep from being outflanked and to keep visual contact with it in case I had to shoot it. This was in the late fall, so the bear probably hadn't put on enough fat for the year and was looking to supplement it. Spooky stuff. Those sound like the same conditions that Timothy Treadwell and his companion got munched in. It was his girlfriend, a Huguenot. She was terrified of bears and did not want to be there according to her journal. They stayed later into the year than they normally did during a very lean year for food, supposedly because Treadwell didn't want to pay a fee the airline was asking for. Camped next to a stream where they saw bears he didn't diving for fish, and he admitted he wasn't comfortable around those same bears on camera. Then they got attacked and eaten by at least one bear. When the bush pilot landed the next day, he found an abandoned campsite and was charged by a bear. After the pilot called the authorities, they found the bodies and had to shoot 2 bears. They autopsied one and found human remains. Apparently there is an audio-only video that captures Treadwell being attacked and eaten, and Huguenot trying to save him. There is a ton of controversy about it, because there are a shit ton of fake videos out there. Supposedly it has never been copied, much less posted, but that is also impossible to verify. People who have seen it have pretty much only spoken up to shoot down the more popular fakes, but very few details of the video have ever been made public, besides that it exists, and the gist of its contents. All in all, he played with fire and got both of them killed, plus 2 bears. What a brutal way to go. Huguenot trusted Treadwell and died because of it. Many years ago, when I was about 14, I was hiking deep in the woods behind my house with some friends. We were miles away from home, further than any of us had ever gone before. And we came up to the edge of a clearing, and a little further down the trail line, we saw a lump of clothes underneath an old deer stand. We got a little closer, and we could make out legs and arms and boots. They were wet from rain, and had been there for a while. Obviously, our first thought was that it was a hunter who had an accident, and fallen out of his stand and was dead. We were freaked out, and it took us a little bit to get up the nerve to get a better look. It wasn't until we were practically on top of it that we realized that it was a dummy. We had wandered all the way up to the edge of a big Christmas tree farm's property, and the dummy was part of their decorations from a haunted hayride thing they did. They must have forgotten about it when closing up for the year. We had a good laugh, but we were all scared shitless for a few minutes. That would have freaked me out. Absolute silence. No wind, no animals, nothing. 1 second there were all the sounds of nature, then nothing. Lasted for a few seconds, that felt like an eternity. We have property in the mountains of North Carolina that used to be isolated enough that you didn't hear anything except the sound of nature. There is more development these days on the other side of the ridge, but it is still pretty quiet. The first time I ever heard a fox scream, though, man, I will never forget that sound. I was maybe 6 or 7 and kicked the side of the tent to wake up my dad. Our kids were inside the tent. My dad slept under the stars beside it. He was excited about it, explained exactly what it was, and how cool it was that I got to hear it, so it made it a little less scary. Same property, but in recent years. It being so absolutely quiet in the dead of winter that you can hear snowflakes hit the ground. It is not creepy, but is definitely unsettling, like having earplugs in, but still hearing whispers. I went camping with a friend once, in some remote woods that were owned by his family, completely undeveloped. In the middle of the first night, we heard this unearthly moaning sound, like there were angry wraiths in the woods all around us. Fucking terrifying, unlike any animal sounds we'd ever heard. Turns out some squatters had built a little shanty in the woods, close to where we camped, and they had a few Irish wolfhounds that roamed the woods at night. They probably caught our scent, and were nervously circling around us, not wanting to get too close, howling to each other. That sound is unnerving, if you don't know what it is. Was in my 20s growing pot in the coastal mountain range of California. Found a trash bag partially buried with a human torso missing its hands, feet and head. Oh my god. This is the worst one. I hope you were eventually okay. Yet, bought myself a shotgun and stayed clear of that side of the mountain for the rest of the year. Yeah, that seems like a wise reaction. Props to you for being able to ever go back. Well, I still had a couple months to go until harvest, so yeah, but I never went back there for another grow lol. I was wild camping in the middle of a dense forest, and at around 2 a.m. I was woken up by a girl crying not too far away. I didn't know what to do, so I just waited. She carried on crying for like 15 minutes, and then I heard a guy say, "Oh, come on now, let's go home." I didn't hear anything else after that. It scared the hell out of me. Were you not tempted to investigate before hearing the second voice? I'd definitely be that curious one who gets killed in a horror film lol. I had a similar experience and felt like I had to investigate. I was backpacking on the At in Maine years ago. Myself and several others were in a lean-to, just turning in as it got dark. I thought I heard a woman yell something. I asked the others, but no one heard it. I almost dismissed it, but I just had to check, so I set off down the trail with a flashlight. I found a hiker about 5 minutes later, really distraught. She had been in a town resupplying, and this aggressive guy had really scared her, so she set off on the trail to get away, hoping to reach the lean-to, gave up as it got dark, and yelled in frustration. We went to the lean-to by flashlight. She was worried the guy might follow, so I hiked south with her for a couple days, leaving some warnings in trail registers about the guy. 2 guys wearing military gear with sneakers in the middle of the desert. In Mexico, that's one of the easiest ways you can tell the difference between an army soldier and a cartel criminal. Soldados con tenis and his no te levantaron. Hey, I'm learning Spanish, and I can't seem to wrap my brain your message. Would you mind helping me understand? My best guess is soldiers in sneakers, before they didn't raise you. But I must be missing something. Thanks. I'll help you out. This is basically slang. It is an informal way of talking. There is no functional translation of anti is no T apostrophe, so it'll have to be a rough translation of the intended meaning. On the other hand, Levanter is slang for kidnapping. The sentence is basically saying how he got the best case scenario not being kidnapped. The context for this is the narco groups disguise themselves as soldiers or cops, but they don't wear proper military footwear but rather sneakers, with the sole purpose of nothing good: kidnapping for ransom, mugging, beatings, etc. Good luck with Spanish, it's a clusterfuck. I was camping on the Deschutes River by myself one night. It was middle of the week, so I had the campground to myself. There isn't another human being within 5 miles. I drink a few beers as the sun goes down in the canyon. Cloudy night, so no stars and no moon. No campfires since it was well into fire season. Combined with the clouds, this made it essentially pitch black. It's dark and no one can see me, so I put on some headphones and start dancing around my campsite like a Woodstock hippie. When my nose catches a faint whiff of something awful, I take off my headphones and hear nothing, and before I can turn my headlamp on, I hear big thundering of hooves/feet/paws, feel a huge whoosh of wind about 2 feet in front of my face, then loud crash into the bushes next to my campsite. Before whatever had jumped through the bushes even hit the ground, I had ran to my truck, laid down in the trunk, and locked all the doors. I didn't move for the rest of the night. Slept in my vehicle, held like 5 beers worth of pee until daylight. When I wake up in the morning, all I can see is a small bit of blood on the tongue of my boat trailer, some sort of prints in the dirt, and a giant 5-diameter hole in the bushes next to my camp. To this day I have no idea what happened. The hypothesis is that a deer wandered into the campsite and saw me being oblivious dancing like a fool, but when I stopped moving it got spooked and tried to run into a bush. Must have nicked itself on the trailer as it jumped over it. I don't think my life was ever in danger, but it was terrifying, and not knowing what it was makes it even worse. Backpacking the Maryland/PA section of the Appalachian Trail around the age of 17. 4 of us were sleeping under a tarp tied up with paracord, so we only had protection from the rain. I am guessing around 2 a.m. I am woken up by hearing branches breaking and movement nearby. Nothing out of the normal. This time of year the worst it could be is a lone curious black bear, and they don't really pose any real threat. The sounds start getting closer and more rhythmic. Definitely something walking. I turn on my side to see if I can see anything. As the walking is getting closer, I start to see movement in the leaves with nothing making it. I perfectly hear a person walking towards us, and eventually making its way around our makeshift shelter. I am freaking out, and lay in complete silence for what felt like an eternity until my friend laying next to me finally says, "You heard that shit too, right?" Nearly jumped out of my sleeping bag, but also confirmed I didn't dream the whole thing. Still have no explanation and half convinced we just had a collective fever dream. On a non-paranormal sense and way scarier than what I typed above. I was stalked by a mountain lion in the Rockies a few years ago. The unease that turns into full terror when you realize what is happening. Then fighting every instinct not to run like a mofo is a unique experience. Having that primal feeling that your prey is fucking terrifying. The Appalachian Trail is full of the unusual, honestly. So many stories come from it, both nice. The stars were beautiful / I got to experience a soul-shaking thunderstorm, and the eye was hunted / some dude in a full pristine suit passed me at a marker 15 miles between Adirondacks / lodging sites. I'm in the UK, but myself and several friends had similar experiences to the dude in a pristine suit. Seems a weirdly common experience, that when wandering the woodland in rural Lincolnshire, you might cross paths with a well-dressed older man who smiles, nods and greets you, walks on, then seems to vanish abruptly. Nothing bad ever seems to come of it, but definitely unnerving. I have a honey hole about 3 miles deep into the national forest area where I hunt, usually get dropped off and hike in for a weekend. Hogs, white-tailed deer, black bears, panthers all are in the area. I've grown up around it. There isn't much I haven't seen out there. Last November I make the trek back in there and set up my hammock and get ready to camp out for the night, so I can hunt from sun up to sundown. I lay down and maybe 10 minutes later hear the most blood-curdling screaming not far off. Bobcats, foxes and limpkins can all sound like screaming, but this was different. There was something about it that just didn't feel right. Sat up and grabbed my binoculars and started scanning the edge of the swamp. Caught a glimpse of what looked like the shape of a woman running full speed away from something about 200 yards out. Now mind you, I am a good few hours walk from a paved road. Hell, even the service dirt road is maybe a little over a mile behind me, and yes, going in the clear opposite direction. Only thing out there is woods and eventually the river. Put down the binoculars and grabbed my rifle so I could use the scope if she was being chased by a bear or panther. Didn't see a damn thing. Absolutely nothing. Brushed it off as something my mind made up. The sun was setting, so I decided to get some rest. Went to sleep clutching my rifle a little tighter than usual. Woke up the next morning and decided to go check the spot where I thought I saw her running. Found smallish barefoot footprints in the mud. Packed my shit up quick fast and in a hurry. Haven't been back since. Stories like yours are the reason why I'm terrified of going camping. Camping is great, just stay in designated campgrounds to start. And if you think you saw some shit, don't go check it out. Oh, and stay away from any random pet cemeteries. Also random staircases in the woods. Said it, because I forgot to add. This is a reference to an incredible thread in the same genre from a guy who worked in the National Forest Service. If my memory serves. I'd link the thread, but my Reddit search skills blow. It was like an 8-part series though. I go around Australia looking for the most venomous snakes on the planet. Because of that I can't and stay in some pretty remote places. But the weirdest experience I've had was close to home. Was driving on a bush track in a state park that's about 10 minutes from my house. Was about 10 minutes into driving the track, when in complete darkness there is a barefoot guy walking with a hammer. He had no light, and was walking, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. This state park isn't really connect with anything or anywhere. There are no houses within it, and the closest houses are about 2 kilometers from the entrance. He was nowhere near the entrance. Weird stuff. Did your job require you to look for venomous snakes, or just your hobby? I am an ecologist, so both really. I've shared this multiple times on here, but it still creeps me out. Greater than my husband, kid, and I live out in the middle of nowhere on a plot of land that's about 100 acres. I'd say probably 95 of those acres are wilderness with ATV and hiking trails that we, and several of the previous owners, created by exploring. We use that land for camping, hiking, and hunting. We like to find a spot, clear it a bit, and camp overnight. There's so much space we've never stayed in the same place twice. Greater than we've seen some kill sites, both old and fresh. Lots of animal tracks, places where deer bed down, etc. I've even spent a lot of time hiking solo, while the kid is in school and husband's at work. Whether alone or with the family, we always carry a firearm for protection. Greater than a few weeks ago, we decided to load up our camping gear and start a new trail. We mark the trails we make with spray paint on trees. We were pretty far in the woods, having hiked almost an hour, when the atmosphere seemed to change. I don't know who noticed it first, but my husband, who was leading the 3 of us, turned around and gave me a concerned look. The birds had stopped chirping, the insects were quiet. There were no sounds around us. When in the woods, complete quietness is rarely a good thing. Greater than we continued onward, hyper-aware of our surrounds, while our kid continued merrily talking. We came to the stream that marks the midway point of our property. We stopped for a few minutes, the husband and I in a stare down with each other. We both felt something was off, but didn't want to scare our daughter. I finally broke the silence and said I suddenly didn't feel good, and that we should go home. The husband nodded in agreement, while our daughter voiced her protest. Too bad, kiddo. Greater than we turned around and started back. After going a few hundred yards, still in silent wilderness, I looked to my right and saw a person crouched down in a gill suit about 150 feet off our trail. I am positive they saw that I noticed them, but they never moved. I cleared my throat to get my husband's attention, and when he looked back, I put my hand on the gun in the holster on my hip, which caused him to readjust his rifle in preparation of anything. I sped up my family and we hurried back home. I told my husband as soon as we were inside. We decided to call the police and report the trespasser. Filed a report and was told to call again if we saw anyone. Greater than a few days later, the husband and I went out alone and set up a bunch of deer cams. We didn't go back out into the woods for maybe a week, then he and I ventured out to retrieve the cam footage. Out of the 9 cams we placed, we caught a person in a ghillie suit into images. We handed copies over to the cops to go with our report. Greater than we haven't gone back out since except to check the deer cams. Haven't got in any other trespasses. It freaks me out even more to think of the few times, while camping, that we heard walking near our tent in the middle of the night. We always assumed it was curious animals, but now I'm not so sure. Edit to add. I know the distance we traveled in an hour wasn't much. We live in the Appalachian foothills, so it's a lot of up and down terrain. We were also clearing a path on land that has never had any structures or logging, marking our trail, and most importantly teaching our then 9-year-old. We frequently stop to identify animal tracks, poop, bones, plants, and trees. Our kid takes a minute to sketchbook and draws the scat, bones, plants, act. It's a fun trip without a destination or time limit. This one's the freakiest. Everyone's scared of bears and cougars, but when I am out in the wilderness it is the 2-legged creatures that keep my head on a swivel and sidearm at the ready. Unnerving having someone on your property watching you wearing a ghillie suit. I don't like that at all. Probably a dumb Santa who doesn't respect private property. Yet, sounds like a poacher to me. Hunted with my dad and his buddy he grew with and his buddy's son once. I was about 15 or so and so was the other kid. The other kid was straitjacket crazy. When our dads weren't around he would make comments about killing us all before the trip was over. Anytime I told my dad he would just tell me he was just bullying me. He finally got caught loading his rifle and pointing it at his own dad. I told my dad I would quit hunting if we ever went with them again. We never did. Total psycho, good on you holding your ground. Was turkey hunting once. I set up on a side hill with a decoy in a clearing at the bottom of the hill. Slight rain that day was overcast and concealed in between a couple bushes. I was trying to call in some toms. This went on for about an hour and I could hear the turkeys calling back and making their way into my decoy shotgun across my lap. This is where it got scary. I could hear, but not see the turkeys yet, but out of nowhere movement caught my eye about 15 feet to my right. A damn cougar had snuck down the hill next to me without me even knowing. He didn't know I was there either. The heart started pounding so hard I'm surprised he didn't hear it. I just sat there and watched the cougar hunt the turkeys I had called in. Terrifying and kinda cool at the same time. He knew. They always know. They just don't want anything to do with you. The one thing that never leaves my mind hiking is they see me, even if I don't see them. This is all true. I was 19 at the time, a little inexperienced, and all thought I grew up outdoors. I always felt like he knew. So creepy to me to this day. I don't think anyone would have known he was there, no matter the experience you have. I had a bear approach my tent one night, while my girlfriend and I was sleeping during a 7-day through hike. When you're sleeping deep in the woods, it's frequently the case that you hear little sounds that seem like big things. Then you worry a little as to whether or not what you are hearing is a big animal. With this sound, on this night, there was absolutely no doubting that what I was hearing was a large animal, and it was coming straight for my tent. All my food was hung in a tree nearby, but he must have smelled us. Not only did he come right up to the tent, but he started to sniff at the edge of it. We could hear him sniffing. At this point we were still both in our sleeping bags. My girlfriend was petrified. I banged on the side of the tent and yelled real loud. The bear ran off into the woods. A few minutes passed, and we heard him clomping through the brush, headed straight back to our tent. Then there was more sniffing, right at the exact corner he had sniffed at before. We yelled again, and off he went running back into the woods. By this point I'd had enough. I grabbed the bear spray, climbed to my feet barefoot and butt naked with only my headlamp and glasses on. I was asleep with my contacts out. I got out of the tent as quickly as I could. When I stood up, I immediately saw his eyes off in the distance. When you're wearing a headlamp, animal eyes reflect directly back at you, but all you see are two bright spots. I picked up a stick and held it his direction while yelling, and he ran off. This was all on a section of the PCT in Washington. I was deep in the wilderness, but there were other campers at the lake that we were at. Wouldn't you know it, the other campers started cheering for my goofy naked ass. TL:"dr" I chased a bear away, while shoeless and butt naked in the middle of the night. I'm not a camper, but sleeping naked in the woods like that seems like perhaps not the best idea. Haha. I'd imagine they had hot, passionate, rank tent sex, and that's what attracted the bear in the first place. Bill must have heard the noises/smells and wanted to have a looky-loo. Ever had sex while camping? It's fucking intense. One day in February, skipped class and went bouldering solo in Red River Gorge, Kentucky. Walking below a cliff line, and an ice block the size of a car exploded about 4 feet behind me. The shrapnel cut my leg. Was wearing shorts. Scared the hell out of me. I would have been a pancake. I went fishing on the Missouri River, and unexpectedly sunk up to my waist in mud, and really thought I was going to be unable to get out. It was just a surreal moment of panic, and I knew I had to try and get out, possibly make it worse, or call 911. I leaned back and basically made mud angels with my arms until I could push myself out. 2 stories come to mind, both while through hiking the PCT. In Washington, my hiking partner and I did roughly 30 minutes of hiking at dusk. Going down switchbacks, we encountered a mountain lion standing 10 away from us. At this point we were 2 miles from camp. We did what we had to do to try to scare it off, but we had a standoff with it for about 20 minutes. It definitely wasn't he stalking us. Was curious as to why we scared off its dinner. Lola held onto my friend's pack while she hiked forward, and I walked backwards to make sure it wasn't he following us. Took us about 2 hours to go 2 more miles. Second was in Oregon, not too far past Crater Lake. We were camped not too far from a trailhead in the middle of nowhere. Around 2 a.m. a few pickup trucks pulled up, and starting yelling and screaming random stuff. They blindly started shooting into the woods. Thankfully I don't think in our direction. Reminds me of a story a friend told me. He was working to help clear out underbrush in the backcountry, and it involved him carrying a chainsaw with him everywhere. One night he was hiking back to camp and sees eyes reflecting in his headlamp. He assumes it's just cows, because he was working on a ranch at the time, but as he gets closer he sees it a mountain lion. He ended pulling out his chainsaw and sitting there and revving it for about 15 minutes before it left him alone.